So in this video I'm going to be showing off this new door. This is the new smallest 3x3 observerless piston door at only 70 blocks. It beats the previous long-standing record at 77, which is by Exorbitant and MadCloud, although this does use a lot of more recent features, 1.16 features. So they're not really comparable, but here it is. Let's show you opening and closing. And again with a frame. So it's not too slow at all, and it works very nicely. Now, I will next be showing you how to build this. A couple of things to mention beforehand. This is locational. This dust here has to power this piston first and then this one, such as that. If it doesn't do that, it will instead push this block over and break the pressure plate and move the zombie pigment, which we obviously don't want. So make sure that's correct. And for sake of everything, I'm building it in this direction with the entrance facing south. One other thing to mention is this does actually get affected by the input bug. So if you want to use a repeater input, all you're going to have to do is change this repeater from 3 to 2 ticks. Like so. And that's all you have to change, and then to use a lever input you make that on 3 ticks. But I believe that's all to mention, so let's get on to the build. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is actually place some of the annoying minecarts that we need to for this build. There's probably better methods for doing a bunch of these, but this is the ones that I'm familiar with. So we're going to need a clip inside of this repeater here. So we can get that quite easily just with powered rail. Like so. We're going to get our furnace minecart as a blocker, like so, and push this one into there. That's great. Now we're going to want a flower pot, like so, and now it's inside the repeater. Now what we can do is push it up with a soul sand, like so. And then we can push it across as much as we need. So I'm going to do this in a bit of a weird way just because it will make my life a bit easier. So I'm going to push it across first, and later we'll push it back. Because I'm now going to push it not quite entirely. No, we're now going to push it with the honey just to keep it inside the correct block. So it's still sitting on that soul sand. And next what I'm going to do is get 3 seed pickles and push it into that, like so. And that should be about the correct height and distance away. There's definitely a better way of doing that, but this works. And we're going to keep that soul sand as well, because that will be our input block, and that's what the minecart is going to rest on forever. Excellent. So now we can do our next one, which I'm just going to do with 2 seed pickles, and that will rest nicely on top. Next we're going to use one with a cobble wall, like so, and then finally we're going to have a repeater here. And then we're going to have one which we're going to push into a lantern. And there are reasons for these I'll go into as we start building the circuits, but we still need to place these first. Okay, now that's great. We can push in all of our original pistons again. And one last one. Excellent. Okay, so that's all the minecarts placed. So now we can get going on the circuitry. This here is our input block. It's going to power 2 of our side pistons immediately. I'm going to take an output of that with a torch, and then we're going to go up with another torch and into a block. You could also choose a slab for this, with a 3-tick repeater. And then what we're going to do is have an iron pressure plate. Wow, it's not called that. Great. So immediately we can see why some of these minecarts are being used. So if we just power this, you can see that's going to extend, and then it will retract when this piston here extends. And then what we can do is when we retract this, we can see it does that final retraction. And I'll get into the explanation after we've finished building. So next we need to get the signal down to the bottom, and so we're going to do that with a dual edge getting from that piston. And the way we're going to do that is using a mob. So you can use most mobs, to be honest, but they need to be aligned quite nicely. I'm going to use a zombie pigman just because it works and it's not aggressive and it doesn't burn or anything. So we're going to get ourselves a zombie pigman and push that into there against a middle wall. It's important that there's a middle wall. Okay, and next what we're going to do is drop it down onto an end rod, and we're going to attach this to an end rod, and that height is important. Except we don't need to keep the end rod because we can instead use a soul sand, and there's a height at the same, there's a hitbox at the same height. Next what we need to do is just replace these blocks that we placed before. And we can see that when we place a stone pressure plate here, when this extends, we get a pulse, and when it retracts, we also get a pulse, just due to the way it moves. And this block here, we can see the pigment only suffocates when there's a block inside that red line or near it, and so we avoid the suffocation problem. And of course we have to use a stone pressure plate because the minecart is actually touching the pressure plate, but it only turns on when the pigment touches it because it's stone. Anyway, next what we're going to do is get a pulse from that because we need a 1-tick pulse. And the way we do that is very simple. We use the most basic monostable circuit. Just creates a little 1-tick that comes out of this repeater here. Because the basic way that this works is quite simple. So when we attach a burnout to this, which is locational by the way, the location requires that this piston here is powered rather than this one, so make sure. And we can show just, you can see it does all of the closing, except it doesn't end up in the right place. And so by sending a 1-tick pulse, we instead have 9 pulses as opposed to 8, and that means that we can that means we have an extra pulse, which will do it properly. Oops. Like so. And the same applies on the opening, although the opening gets a bit more complex with timings to do the top and bottom, which I'll get to when I'm finished. Next we need to power the side pistons, and so using this odd number of pulses we can actually use a very similar little concept and use this piston here as a toggle for that, because what this is going to do is then going to, when I power this one time, we're going to have a cobble wall on this by the way. So I do this once, and it's left powered, and we do it again, and it's left unpowered, and so that works quite nicely. And so when we put our arm stand on, push it against the wall, and then we're just gonna do that. And so this is gonna push up and power that pressure plate, which will then depower like so. And finally, last bit of circuitry to get is our signal from the top, which we're going to do with a cauldron and filled with water. This repeater has to be on 3 ticks, and we're going to get a signal out with a comparator. The reason why that repeater has to be on 3 ticks is because due to the fact that this piston is spamming, because it's burnout, this pressure plate can actually flick on and off for a brief moment. But we don't want that to unpower this until it's ready, and so the repeater being on 3 ticks stops it being unpowered. Excellent. So now we can see that this is all done. and that all works. So a couple of things about this. This timing up here is important for the bottom. So we can see, because this is spamming, we actually need it to align such that it does the correct number of pulses and doesn't end up in the wrong state. And by making that on 3 ticks, we can see it waits to push down until then. And that means that we get the correct number of pulses. As well as that, this piston here stays extended in this position for a long time because it's actually permanently powered from here. This is still powered now. And that means that we don't give the storage at the bottom a chance for it to spit back up again, which is a problem with other designs that don't use that. But then obviously, as this is permanently powered, we need a way of retracting this piston, and the way is very simple. When this top piston retracts, it pulls this minecart up with it, which powers the pressure plate. This pressure plate not only will repower this top piston, but also this one, such that this will depower. Then when this turns off, it'll pull the minecart up again, which will power after 1 game tick, meaning that this piston will be pulled into the power position and update first, doing the final retraction, like so. Now, the reason for this complicated minecart setup is that when pistons are retracting, they have other internal hitboxes at every quarter of a block high. This is a problem because it means that this minecart inside the piston will get blocked by the internal hitboxes of this piston, which means it won't be able to be pulled up. To get around this, I've made this precise stack, which ends up with this minecart. The top of this minecart is above that final hitbox, meaning that it can't be blocked. And that's why it has this annoying arrangement here. And then, because it can get pulled up too far, and then actually once again balance on the top of internal hitbox rather than being blocked from underneath, I have this blocker minecart here, which will stop this minecart being pulled up too far. And this blocker minecart has to be precisely placed against a lantern, because if it's pushed any further into the block, for example against a fence gate or fence post, it'll actually be pulled up by this piston and land on top of the block, which is no help. But I hope some of that made sense, because it's quite specific entity placements and stuff, but that is actually all that you need to know in order to build this smallest Observerless 3x3 piston door at 70 blocks. Now, there is one other thing that we can do. If we don't like the inclusion of a mob, which I understand, I see nothing wrong with it, but I get that you might not want it, we can actually make a small change that will make it work without. Unfortunately, it does also make it illegal because it will use uncontained slime, but it does work. So here's another option if you want to build it on a creative server where mobs aren't allowed, for example. And this slime circuit is like this. We're going to basically replace this dual edge with a slime bud. So we're going to get ourselves some slime blocks, or honey of course. And here we're going to place a normal block, which we're going to power this repeater with, this block which will stop it clocking, and then a redstone block here. As far as I know, this actually can help to remove the locationality as well, because this piston will be moving at the point where this has to push across. So this is actually also a fix for the locationality, I think. And so we can then test that this works. And there we go. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Small one, I couldn't really be bothered to make any edits or anything, so hope this video was alright, and I'll see you in the next one.